Okay, good evening and happy birthday to Paul. I mean, it's not your birthday, but it's the birthday of the Larchmont Library. I was reading it was in November 1926 that this building opened there, and doesn't look a day over 100, does it? So anyway, thank you for being here on this cold evening and out in Zoom land. Just drop us. Feel like I'm on YouTube, like an influencer. Drop us a like. Don't drop us a like. Just if you have anything to say, just type it in there and welcome everybody. And again, happy birthday to the library. And we're looking at the year 1926, 100 years ago, and things that happened in 1926. Now, I love doing 1920s talks. And I love talking to people who are in their 60s and 70s. And I ask them, was your mother a flapper? Did anybody in your family go to a speakeasy or the Cotton Club? And I've gotten some answers about women, their mothers or grandmothers dancing on tabletops in Harlem at, say, the Cotton Club. And there they are, the flappers. And they were a danger to society, according to some people, the flappers. Hey, Nat King Cole, where's he going to get his kicks? Route 66 or Route 60 or Route 62? Can you imagine a song Route 66 being route? What do you rhyme with 60? Anyway, it almost was Route 60 or Route 62. Gertrude Ederle swims the English Channel, and she becomes America's girl, according to the President of the United States, Calvin Coolidge. Was there a Coolidge prosperity? Well, it depends on what part of the socioeconomic ladder you were on. For some people, it was great. For others, not so good. The United Kingdom has a general strike over wages, of course. NBC, and I work for NBC Radio and helped close it down, as a matter of fact. But it started in 1926, and there were two networks, NBC Red, NBC Blue. And Henry Ford, 40-hour work week, and that's my friend Don Cundy talking to my wife over at the Henry Ford Museum, which is in Dearborn, Michigan, which kind of surprised me when I was there because half the museum is a civil rights museum, and you would never associate Henry Ford with civil rights, and the other half is Americana and cars. Rudolph Valentino dies. The great Valentino, and people sobbed when he died. In Germany, well, you have Hitler beginning his renaissance, so to speak, after spending time in jail. And Germany and the Soviets also make nice in 1926. And that is Robert Goddard, who figured out how to get to the moon in 1914. And here he is with his rocket in Massachusetts in 1926. I want to be alone. You could all leave. I want to be alone. Greta Garbo makes her screen debut. And Mary Poppins. Mary Poppins pops up in 1926. Mary Poppins and the Matchman. And Winnie the Pooh. I'm sure you have Winnie the Pooh here. It is published. 100th anniversary of Winnie the Pooh. And, first SAT. Sample question. And each group contains 6 words. 3 of these words are related to each other in some definitive way. Indicate which 3 are true. Most closely related by inserting the numbers of these words in the spaces at the right. The first 2 are answered correctly. And I guess doll, ring, flower, drum, top, and shoe. Well, you got drum top and rather doll top and doll shoe. So I don't know, and then the next one is bean, carrot, potato, beet, lettuce, cabbage, and it has carrot, potato, and beet all as the answers there. So they were screwing around with people 100 years ago. America has entered the modern age. As you can see, there are cars down the street. The economy was booming. The jazz age was in full swing. Social mores were looser than ever, and the nation was celebrating new dances. Anybody teach you how to do the Charleston?
Yeah.
Yeah? Who taught you? Who taught you how to do the Charleston?
Honey Adams School of Dance.
Oh, the honey. I thought it'd be your mother or your grandmother.
Oh, maybe so.
Yeah, but the Honey Adams School of, is that still in existence?
No, but it was in the 50s.
Yeah, where was it, by the way?
It was here in Larchmont.
Oh, in Larchmont. Okay. Anyway, I got one thing here in the chat before I go on here, unless you want to tell me what's going on with the chat.
Yeah, so was someone just, I can tell you where it's going.
Yeah.
Someone just wants to know if it's being recorded.
Yeah. Okay.
You're gonna send it to
Yeah,
me?
I'll send it to you.
Okay.
Anyway, so the mores were looser than ever. The nation was celebrating new dances, gadgets, and heroes. A lot of heroes. In the 1920s, though, Americans faced a perplexing world. While many Americans still believed in the Victorian values of modesty, hard work, and respect for tradition, status, and place, others defiantly broke from convention in their work and personal lives, in their actions, and in their words. Most Americans searched for a compromise between the world that they knew. Yeah, remember, some of these people who were around in 1920s were born in the 1850s and 60s. No electricity, no cars, no radios. And all of a sudden, what's going on here? This is the world we're now living in. And the world that they would come to know, not yet ready to fully disengage from the past or to fully embrace the future. There was the urban versus rural split. Hey, where do you get your kicks? Yes.
Someone mentioned they learned the Charleston in gym class.
In gym class. There you go. Anyway, get your kicks on Route 66. Me and my daughter, Santa Monica, and that was the end of Route 66. So although when Bobby Troup wrote the song, he didn't write where the end of, he wrote where it began in Chicago, but he never wrote that it ended on Ocean Avenue in Santa Monica. The music, the numerical designation 66. We got another one there? Okay. The numerical designation 66 was assigned to the Chicago to Los Angeles route, which made Bobby Troup happy, I'm sure, in the summer. And US Highway 66 was established. Now, Route 66 had its official beginnings when the Bureau of Public Roads launched the nation's first federal highway system. Like other highways in the system, the path of Route 66 was a cobbling together of existing local, state, national roads, some of which were not paved. And it is 1926. The highway quickly became a popular route because of the active promotion of the US 66 Highway Association, which advertised it as the shortest, best, and most scenic route from Chicago through St. Louis to Los Angeles. And you stop in Joplin, Missouri, and Oklahoma City, looks mighty pretty. And you see Amarillo, and there it is. From Chicago, it winds from Chicago to LA, more than 2,000 miles along the way. Now, it was originally designated Highway 60. And states raised objections to this designation. Kentucky was one. Said, wait a minute, this plan leaves the state out entirely, and that based on the placement of other proposed east-west roads, a highway numbered 60 logically should run through Kentucky. Kentucky subsequently received the route number 60, and the original 60 was changed first to 62 and then to 66 in the final version of the plan, which was approved on Armistice Day in 1926. Organized crime and prohibition. So any of you here or out there in Zoom land have stories of, say, a grandparent being a bootlegger? Oh, the light's going on there.
No, Larchmont was a very active place.
Oh, was it for bootlegging? Did you know that, Paul? No, now you could do a library talk with her on. So, yeah, there were at least 50,000 speakeasies in Manhattan, at least 50,000. And I've heard stories how, and you talk to these women, oh, my grandmother, she was a little old lady, but when she was young, she used to make bathtub gin. She made bathtub gin. I've heard of all of those stories. Organized crime and prohibition. It is September 20th. Chicago's North Side gang attempts to assassinate a powerful mob boss and rival Al Capone at the Hawthorne Hotel in Cicero, Illinois. Despite over 1,000 rounds of submachine gun ammunition being fired, Capone escapes unharmed. The Roaring Twenties. Now, I'm going to give you a story. When I was working at the Rockland Drive-In movie back in 1974, 52 years ago, we had a projectionist by the name of Albert Morris, who was from Montreal, somehow ended up in Rockland County, and he was Canadian, and he lived in Spring Valley. And I was told by the guy who ran the drive-in, the manager, Emil Cambria, go up and talk to Al. You're going to be a journalist, do a story on him. And I went up there and he said, what are you doing here? I said, I heard you were a bootlegger. So who told you? I said, well, tell me about being a bootlegger. He said, well, he said, I used to go Suffern. Suffern has that massive train, the tracks. They go up to Montreal and they go west to Chicago. Well, the stuff would come down from Montreal. And he'd pick it up, put it in his car, take it, put it in his bathtub, water it down, and have 2 flasks instead of 1, put it back on the train and send it somewhere. I said, now this is 1974. Prohibition's over 41 years by now. He would not tell me where it was going. I said, who paid you? I don't know. I forgot. I said, Al, it's 41 years later. Mum was still the word. Mum was still the word, and it probably was with a lot of bootleggers. Meanwhile, health authorities terminate dance marathon at local ballroom. You cannot dance 24 straight hours. And marathon dancing was a big deal in the 1920s. Now, the popular image of the 1920s is that of a decade of prosperity, riotous living, and of bootleggers and gangsters and flappers and hot jazz. How'd you like to sit on a flagpole? Shipwreck Kelly made flagpole sitting a thing, and marathon dances, and is indelibly etched in the American psyche. But also in the 1920s, it was a decade of deep cultural conflict, pitting a more cosmopolitan, modernist urban culture against a more provincial, traditional rural culture. Has that changed in 100 years? It's about the same. There was a struggle between old and new America, immigration, race, alcohol, evolution, gender politics, sexual morality all became major cultural battlefields. Wait, what year am I talking about? Wets battled dries. The wets were the anti-prohibition people. Religious modernists battled religious fundamentalists. Urban ethnics battled the Ku Klux Klan. And speakeasies, well, that was prohibition's worst kept secret. All you needed to know, like Harpo, was the password, which obviously is swordfish. There you go, swordfish. When Prohibition took effect on January 17th, 1920, many thousands of formerly legal saloons across the country, catering only to men, closed down. But if you wanted your booze, there were places. You needed a drink, go to a druggist, because it was medicinal purposes. Medicinal purposes. Clergymen, well, you need some wine for whatever religious reason. Yeah, sure, you'll get it from your local clergyman. And there were the illegal sellers, bootleggers like Arnold Rothstein, who put the organized crime. Arnold Rothstein used to have ships coming in from Europe, ships, liners filled with booze coming in. And you figure, well, somebody would get them. Never got them. Never got them. I wonder why. Another option was to enter private, unlicensed ballrooms, bar rooms, nicknamed speakeasies, for how low you had to speak the password to gain entry, so that the cops inside who were drinking wouldn't hear you give the password out. The cops were inside drinking. They were regulars. Look, you had some great entertainment, particularly at the Cotton Club in the Prohibition days. The demand for alcohol in the United States continued, and speakeasies began to proliferate. Somewhere between 20,000 and 100,000 speakeasies were dotted around New York City. Given the huge number, it's not surprising that they varied wildly from modest setups like, I'm making it, who's throwing the party in the, we'll bring it down to 3G after it's all done in our bathtub. Or that served moonshine in building basements and people's residences to glamorous nightclubs that came to embody the roaring 20s. The latter included New York's well-known Cotton Club, which featured jazz bands and dancing. And well, among the people who were the house bands at the Cotton Club was Duke Ellington and Cab Calloway, who used to live here in White Plains. Cab Calloway. The Cotton Club was on 142nd Street and Lenox Avenue, right in the heart of Harlem. It opened in 1923, was operated by white New York gangster Henry Madden. He used the Cotton Club as an outlet to sell his #1 beer that he was making to the Prohibition crowd. Although the club was briefly closed several times for selling alcohol, the owner's political connections allowed them to always reopen quickly. Gee, imagine that, a politician on the take. Nah, couldn't be. Madden deliberately designed the club with a plantation theme, encouraging musicians to play lively music with a jungle sound. He paraded the black performers and employees as savages or plantation residents, playing to the illicit appeal that would have for the middle-class white audiences, and with the hope he'd sell more booze. The Cotton Club at first excluded all white patrons, although all but white patrons, although the entertainers and staff were mostly African-American, and the Cotton Club featured some of the hottest jazz artists around. And there you see Duke Ellington's band over at the Cotton Club. Exceptions to this restriction were made in the case of prominent white entertainment guest stars and dancers. Dancers at the Cotton Club were held to strict standards. They had to be at least 5'6" tall, light-skinned, only slightly tan, and under the age of 21. And Cab Calloway fought against the light skin, saying it should be, we're all entertainers. What's the difference? And he eventually did get his way. Shows at the Cotton Club were musical reviews that featured dancers, singers, comedians, and variety acts, as well as a house band. The entertainers who played at the Cotton Club were some of the most widely known blues and jazz performers of the time, and that included Louis Armstrong. And it came roughly at the same time that the Harlem Renaissance was taking place. The Cotton Club was the birthplace of modern jazz and blues and was in the center of the Harlem Renaissance. Some of the most celebrated names in American music regularly performed in Harlem: Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Bessie Smith, Fats Waller, Cab Calloway. And there was elaborate floor shows. And the tap dancers like John Bubbles and Bill Bojangles Robinson were also very popular. And then there were the flappers. That woman on the right side looks like she's having a darn good time, doesn't she? Look at her. She's all dressed up. She's got the heels on, but she's not dressed really like a flapper. She looks like she's just having a good old time. The United States involvement in World War II started in 1917 and lasted until the war's end in 1918. Who were doing the jobs while the men were away? The women. And the women were quite good at doing their jobs. So women want equality. During that time when the boys were fighting in Europe, women had to hold down the fort in the United States. When the war ended, many young women were used to independence and developed a carefree attitude. Many, but not all women got the right to vote in 1920. There were some exceptions as to which women could vote. Native Americans didn't get citizenship until 1924. Native Americans got citizenship in 1924. Asian Americans, Latinx, and African American women were excluded through poll taxes and other things. The culture quickly shifted from women expected to be wives who are subordinate to husbands to women valuing independence and breaking the rules. Many young women became flappers because it was fun, but they were also known as the lost girls. Why? Because they were undesirable to a lot of people in the United States. Unlike their mothers and grandmothers, flappers tended to go to high school and even college. I have a story about a woman over in Riverdale, the place I speak, whose mother was the black sheep of the family because she went to college. She was from an Orthodox Jewish family. How dare she go to college? And she went to Brooklyn College. And they devoured new books featuring confident, fun-loving adolescent heroines who hiked and camped and solved mysteries. And they biked and they played golf and they played tennis and strove to emulate the flat-chested and hipless physiques of the adolescent boys whose freedom and lack of domestic responsibilities they envy. But they were a grave source of worry to parents, of course, educators, physicians, and clergymen who feared that women playing sports and getting a higher education would be ruinous. We're outnumbered here, Paul. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's only 3 of us. But I'll ask this question: women getting a higher education, that ruined society? In 1972, there was the same argument when Title IX was passed. If women, and that's only 54 years ago, if women got higher education, it would be ruinous to society. And there they are, the flappers. Oh, and by the way, some of the flappers put rouge on their knees to signal something, either yes or no, but they rouged their knees. The post-war prosperity expressed itself in many ways. We got somebody there on the chat, Paul?
They said many still think so.
Oh, many still think so. Okay. Man or a woman?
Thinks woman.
Oh, okay. The post-war prosperity expressed itself in many ways. Is one of the first things that was available was credit. Now, let me explain something here about the credit. The credit came from, credit cards came from the stores. It wasn't until 1974 that women could get credit cards in their own name. Prior to that, they had to have a husband, a brother, male friend, co-sign for them. And they also didn't get the same rates as men. But these credit cards, department stores opened as the middle class could now use credit to obtain upper class luxuries, leading to the birth of consumerism. With it came the flapper dress, mass produced for public consumption. New cosmetic companies sold skin cream to eradicate wrinkles. Magazines advertised flapper hairstyles, clothing, plus extreme diets and dubious claims for the slimming effects of cigarettes and chewing gum. Some women resorted to a new vogue in cosmetic surgery, kicking off an era of damaging self-scrutiny, obsession with weight, youthfulness, and body image. And I think on the home shopping networks on TV today, you can get the same products as 100 years ago. I'm pretty sure of that. And that is Louise Brooks. We got something out there?
Yeah, I got a student loan in 1968 in my own name.
Oh, okay. Okay, that was one of the few. But there was the Federal Credit Card Act that was passed in 1974. Yeah, banks just didn't want to lend women money. They wanted a husband, boyfriend, whatever there. Now, that's Louise Brooks. I don't know how many of you have heard the name Louise Brooks. Well, she was a star of the silent movies, except she didn't really make too many movies. And then she became a historian in the 1950s. She lived a very interesting life. I'm not going to go through the interesting life with her, but she was popular because of her hairstyle called the bob. A flapper cut her hair short into what was called a bob. She wore shorter dresses, rouged her knees. Now, why did she rouge her knees? Well, some meant stop. The other said, I'm all here for you, hot light district. So it depended on who it was, as well as her cheeks. She drank alcohol, smoked cigarettes, dated multiple men before marriage. Increased access to birth control, such as the diaphragm, allowed women to marry with non-marital sex. They went to speakeasies, which was a place where they drank alcohol provided by gangsters. Now you know why the clergy was upset at them. Meanwhile, Gertrude Ederle swims the English Channel, and she does it in a remarkable fashion. Gertrude Ederle was a professional swimmer. She won medals at the 1924 Paris Summer Olympics. And by the way, I do an Olympic talk, and the Olympics tried to bar women in 1914 from the Olympic Games in 1916, which there were none because there was World War I that broke out. They came back with the Olympics in 1920, tried to bar women, and women said, okay, bar us. We're going to have our own Olympics, which they did in 1922, 26, 30, and 34. After the success of the 1922 Women's Olympics in Paris, come on back, women. We want you. Anyway, and she broke various swimming records, but decided there was more to swimming than just competing in the Olympics. She first tried to cross the English Channel in 1925. She didn't make it across, but she learned from experience and she would take a different approach. Now, how many of you women want to go swimming in that bathing suit? That was the bathing suit. That is the 1902 Sears catalog, Sears Roebuck catalog. And basically, they wanted you covered from head to toe if you went into the ocean or a pool. So she decides, you know what? I'm not going to swim in that. She gets rid of the women's traditional bathing suit that she wore last time for a practical one she designed herself. Women's bathing suits were basically wool dresses with stockings and shoes when they emerged in the late 19th century. This is daring. Look at that. That's that's two-piece suit, and she's all slathered up in grease, and she's about ready to swim the English Channel again. Her first attempt across the channel, again, she wore that one-piece suit. It filled with water, chafed her skin. This time, she ends up at the French end of the channel. She's wearing a two-piece suit that she made from cutting up a one-piece suit, and she's all filled with grease. On August 6th, Gertrude Ederle became the first woman to swim the entire English Channel. Only 5 men had ever swum the entire waterway before. The challenges included changing tides, 6-foot waves, frigid temperatures, and lots of jellyfish. She not only made it across, but she beat the 5 men in her timing of 14 and a half hours going 35 miles. She beat out the records of the other 5 men. And she's a conquering hero. She comes back and she is down the Hero of Champions down in Lower Broadway. She is the first woman ever to receive a ticker tape parade down the Canyon of Heroes. She grew up in the New York area. President Calvin Coolidge didn't have much to say, allegedly, dubbed her America's best girl. She was the most famous woman in the world for a short time after the swim. I told you want to go sit on the flagpole at Shipwreck Kelly. Shipwreck Kelly. In 1926, when this place opened, well, flagpole sitting was a big deal. Now, you might notice that tube that's running from his costume there. That is a urine tube. So if he needed to go or if he needed to do something else, it went right down the tube. The Cultural War combatants had one thing in common. They wanted to make money. Most people did not have the opportunity to do so. For wealthy white Americans, the Roaring '20s was a time of immense economic prosperity. Yet for most Americans, it wasn't. Low-paying jobs averaged about $25 a week for men, which would be about $437 today, and $18 a week for women. See, women were getting less money for the same job in those days, about $322 a week in today's money. The speakeasy party culture was popularized in books, movies, magazines. Gatsby came out in 1925, and the book Gatsby was a dud. It was an absolute dud. It only became important during World War II when the publisher just shipped it out to GIs who read it, and some of them ended up in school as administrators and forced you to read Gatsby. That's the only reason we have Gatsby today. But that was only accessible to a very small portion of wealthy, urban, and mostly white Americans. Black Americans and immigrants faced violence from the newly revived Ku Klux Klan, and many workers' wages either did not keep up with productivity or fell off completely. For farmers in particular, the Great Depression began after World War I and banks were failing. And there is Calvin Coolidge, and there is Al Jolson next to him. By the way, Al Jolson was the first celebrity endorser in presidential politics. He endorsed Warren G. Harding, 1920. Even well, somebody wrote the song that he put his name to about why you should vote for Harding or Harding's the man. Jolson is one of the megastars of the era. Him and Babe Ruth and Jack Dempsey and Rudolph Valentino are the stars of stars. On the surface, the economy was good during President Calvin Coolidge's presidency, which started in August the 1st, 1923, following the death of Warren G. Harding. But a closer look at the Coolidge prosperity suggests something else. During the years of Coolidge prosperity, business corporations reaped unprecedented riches as profits soared by 62%, but wages only went up by 7%. And there were bank failures, mostly in the Midwest. Coolidge's failure to aid the depressed agricultural sector seems short-sighted. About 5,000 rural banks in the Midwest and South shut their doors in bankruptcy while many farmers lost their lands. This is before the federal FDIC. So if you lost your money, say goodbye. It wasn't coming back. His tax cuts, Andrew Mellon's tax cut. Andrew Mellon, the father of supply-side economics. His tax cuts contributed to an uneven distribution of wealth and the overproduction of goods. Many Americans were deeply in debt for having purchased consumer goods on easy installment credit terms. And there is the farmer, and the farmer was really hurting. Despite agricultural overproduction and successful attempts in Congress to provide relief, the agricultural economy of the 1920s experienced an ongoing depression. Large surpluses were accompanied by falling prices at a time when American farmers were burdened by heavy debt. The Coolidge prosperity was not evenly distributed, and there is Calvin Coolidge. It was banker Andrew Mellon, Coolidge's Secretary of the Treasury and one of the world's richest men, who engineered successful tax reductions. The group that did not fare well during the Coolidge prosperity, primarily the lower and middle class American families. Group that did well, bootleggers, if they weren't shot and killed. Coolidge personally opposed prohibition, but sought to enforce federal law and refrain from serving alcohol in the White House. His predecessor, Warren G. Harding, used to have drinks for everybody. It was 1926. It was a year of political unrest for many nations across the globe, with protests, invasions, and coups. In Britain, the general strike dominated the headlines for months. In Europe, Poland, Portugal, and Lithuania all saw their governments overthrown. In Germany, Adolf Hitler was cooling his heels, facing deportation to Austria, but the small Nazi party was recruiting members. The general strike in England. It starts on May 3rd, and it's in support of the coal miners' strike. It was an historic walkout by British workers representing the dissatisfaction of millions. The general strike was called by the Trade Union Congress in response to the poor working conditions and lessening of pay. For the previous 2 days, 1 million coal miners had been locked out of the mines after a dispute with money who wanted them to work longer hours for less money. And here they are. They're all on strike in England. The problems began during World War I, when the high demand for coal led to the depletion of reserves. By the end of the war, falling exports and mass unemployment created difficulties throughout the mining industry. This was further impacted by the failure of mine owners to embrace the essential modernization of the industry as other countries did. And again, here is the general strike in England. Private owners were able to make decisions such as cutting pay and increasing hours with no repercussions. The miners were suffering. The work was difficult. Injury and death was commonplace. In the industry was failing to support its workers. And then, of course, the tanks are rolled into the streets to end it all. May 4th, up to 1.75 million workers went on strike, bringing transportation in the UK to a halt. That day, British Broadcasting Corporation, the BBC, broadcast 5 news bulletins a day as no newspapers were published due to the general strike. May 9th, the British government declared martial law because of the general strike. The next day, talks between the government and strikers began. The workers' strike ended on May 12th. No concession to workers. The coal miners' strike continued for another 7 months. The government crushed the unions. The Prime Minister, Stanley Baldwin, ends the martial law that had been declared due to the general strike on December the 2nd, which would be 6 months later. The strike amounted to nothing. Well, see the USA drive a Henry Ford car. Well, not a Chevrolet. Henry Ford's 40-hour work week, and that is an old Model T. On May 1st, Henry Ford approved. Now, you wouldn't think Henry Ford would be a guy worrying about unions and pay, but he was actually, because he wanted his workers to buy the product. On May 1st, Henry Ford approved a 40-hour work week for his employees after he discovered through his research that working more yielded only a small increase in productivity that lasted a short period of time. Ford announced that he would pay each worker $5 per day, which would be $85 today, for an 8-hour work week, which was nearly double what the average auto worker was making at the time. Manufacturers soon followed Ford's lead, and the Monday through Friday work week became a standard practice. Okay, this is something I know a lot about because I've worked for a lot of radio networks that no longer exist, like NBC and CBS and Mutual and Standard. I could go on all night talking about all the networks I work for that have failed because programmers didn't know what they were doing, and then there was all kind of governmental stuff starting in 1980, 81 that ended local newscasts, and then there was the Telecommunications Act of 1996, which basically allowed anybody to buy as many radio stations as they wanted. Prior to that, you could only own 7 AM and 7 FM stations. But the National Radio Network, NBC, the Three Little Tomes, I love you. The National Broadcasting Company was the first permanent full-service radio network in the United States. The Radio Corporation of America's goal was to be able to provide a large number of quality radio programs so that, as one of its newspaper's ads said, every event of national importance may be broadcast widely through the United States. Now, radio starts up here. That is St. John's, Newfoundland. I spoke on cruise ships. That was one of our stops. And that was an old abandoned hospital that Marconi went up to in 1901. And he waited for a radio signal from Cornwall in the UK. And he got it on December 21st. Signal Hill and St. John's was the closest point to Europe in North America, about 2,100 miles. And he picked up the signal. That's my Grundig radio, which is 75 years old and sits unlistened to because it has tubes. Where would I find a replacement for a tube? And probably if I did, it would cost more than what the radio's worth. But it was a good radio. It was AM and FM, and it allowed me to listen on the shortwave to Radio Bulgaria. United States Radio was born on April 14th, 1912, which coincided with the sinking of the Titanic. It was born in Halifax, where the Titanic was pretty close to when it sunk. And David Sarnoff was in the right place at the right time. Sarnoff managed the Marconi wireless station at the Wanamaker's department store in New York City. I think I could ask this group, do you remember Wanamaker's?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, downtown. That's where he was. That's where the Dumont TV studio was. Did you ever hear Wanamaker's?
I think so.
You think so? It used to be in Cross County in Yonkers as well. Yeah. It was a Philadelphia-based operation. Yeah, and also Yonkers. Sarnoff managed the Marconi wireless station at the Wanamaker department store in New York City. That evening, the ocean liner Titanic struck an iceberg not far from Halifax and sunk. There is a young David Sarnoff. Almost immediately, the ship began transmitting distress signals. Soon the airwaves were flooded with the news of the disaster as operators tracked the rescue effort. Sarnoff went to a station at Wanamaker's and oversaw a crew of telegraphers over the next 3 days. They published the names of the survivors of the Titanic tragedy. Well, he decides to go out to Coney Island, which isn't bad going out to Coney Island, but do you really want to go out to Coney Island in the middle of April? Probably not. But anyway, he goes out to the Marconi Seagate Station on Coney Island in Brooklyn and contacted the steamship Carpathia, which picked up the survivors from the Titanic and was returning to New York. He got the names of the passengers that survived. He forwarded the news to the families. And there he was at the Wanamaker's downtown. In 1915 or 1916, Sarnoff figured out we could use the radio waves for something else. He wrote the Radio Music Box Memo, in which he proposed the development of a commercially marketed radio receiver for the home. In 1919, the Radio Corporation of America gets the Marconi radio station from the U.S. Navy. Now, the first quasi-commercial, we got somebody there.
They said Wanamaker's was a step up from Macy's.
Oh, okay. I don't know, was it? You tell me. Anyway, now there was a radio station around Boston that played some music and other things, and it was basically a local ham operator. The ham, which would be an amateur. In 1920, 8MK, which was owned by the Detroit News, did the first newscast. That was August 31st, 1920. And that was the first commercial radio news program ever in the United States. On November 20th, 1920, George Westinghouse Laboratories, KDKA Radio, Pittsburgh, became the first commercially licensed radio station. First program, Steve Carnecki wasn't there. You know who Steve Carnecki? I was on shows with him, by the way. The Harding-Cox presidential election returns. The announcer Leo Rosenberg delivered the results starting at 6 o'clock. This is what puts radio into the house, and it's a Sarnoff idea. The big fight in radio. In those days, there was just one radio station, KDKA in Pittsburgh, but Sarnoff has an idea. I want to do this radio thing, but how do I sell radios? Well, I need programming because nobody's going to listen to two guys talking to each other over a frequency, unless you're me and try to get into the conversation when I was younger. This is Jersey City, and this is a makeshift stadium that seats 90,000 people, and it's July 2nd, 1921. And David Sarnoff figured it all out. If I'm going to sell the radios, I have to have programming, music, news, and sports. And he arranged for the broadcast of the Jack Dempsey-George Carpentier fight. And it was held July 2nd, 1921 at Boyle's 30 Acres, Jersey City, New Jersey. And it was a big deal. They made they grossed more than $1 million, $17.4 million today, which was the largest gate in boxing history. 91,000 people were there, but that wasn't even the story. The radio pioneer, RCA, arranged for live coverage of the match via KDKA Pittsburgh, and their signal boomed into Canada and boomed into Mexico, got out to the Rocky Mountains, got out to, say, Bermuda, got past Florida into the Caribbean. So it's the first national or international radio broadcast because of where it was heard. And there was Jack Dempsey, who was one of the icons of the 1920s. He would win the fight over Carpentier, 4-round knockout. That wasn't the big news. The big news was people bought the radiola. People bought it because of the fight. There was a fight on before. That's Johnny Ray before he sang Crying. No, it's not. No, this is different Johnny Ray. The Johnny Ray of the 1950s, this guy would be about 60 years old by that point. So anyway, it is April 11th, 1921, the first fight and sports event broadcast on KDKA Pittsburgh, 10-round, no decision fight between Johnny Ray, probably was crying afterwards, and Johnny Dundee in Pittsburgh's Motor Square Garden. Radio announcers used to dress like that. Who was seeing them? Who's seeing them? They used to dress up. to the nines. It was August 5th, 1921. Again, KDKA, the first broadcast of a baseball game over the Westinghouse station. Harold Arlen was the announcer of the Philadelphia Phillies Pittsburgh Pirates contest. His grandson, Steve Arlen, played with the San Diego Padres. Hey, Warren G. Harding, you don't listen to radio looking at it, turn your head, but Harding installed the radio in the White House, even though he should be listening. In November 21st, 1921, Harding made history when he sent a radio message over RCA's Radio Central relay network from the White House across the world. Acknowledgments of the message were received in Riverhead, New York, from Australia, Japan, and 15 other countries. Harding does put the radio into the White House February 8th, 1922. Calvin Coolidge, whose nickname was Silent Cal, there's this old story that he ran into somebody at a party, and the woman said to him, "I'll bet you $5 I can make you say more than 5 words." He turns around and says to her, "You lose." Whether that story is true or not, I don't know. Anyway, he followed Harding. He was the first president to broadcast from the White House a Washington birthday speech on February 22nd, 1924, on 42 stations across the country. 1923 World Series on 660 in New York, WEAF. The Giants and the Yankees. AT&T's first radio broadcast was January 4th, 1923, between WEAF in New York and WNAC in Boston. RCA's first network broadcast was December of 1923 between WJZ in New York and the General Electric station WGY in Schenectady. Why the baseball game? Because Babe Ruth was one of the stars of the 1920s. People could tune in and find out what the Babe did. By 1924, the box, the radiola, the radio sold 83 million units, or $83 million worth of units, which today would be $1.49 billion. And they weren't cheap. The cheapest one, $25, $460 today. The most expensive, $275, about $4,700 today. First broadcast from a presidential convention, June 10th, 1924, Republican convention in Cleveland. The big story, Calvin Coolidge was nominated for the Republican Party for president. And notice Coolidge, and he's from Vermont, and he's got a car. If he wants to listen to the radio, he couldn't do it in the winter unless kept the window open in Vermont because the speaker's outside the car. The night before the 1924 election, Coolidge made history. Largest radio audience ever listened to the his final campaign speech. He won the election, and on March 24th, 1925, Americans listened for the first time to a president taking the oath of office on radio. So AT&T decides to get out of the business. They're leaving the business. In July, they decide to exit the broadcasting field, sold the entire network operations to a group headed by the Radio Corporation of America, which used the assets to form the National Broadcasting Company. On September 22nd, a guy named Thomas Edison, you ever hear of Thomas Edison? A guy named Thomas Edison, the inventor of the record player, said, I'm not impressed, and declared radio a commercial failure. He didn't know everything. Boom, boom, boom. 3 little tones, NBC Blue. The network was formed by General Electric, Westinghouse Electric, and the Radio Corporation of America. Though NBC originally began as a scheme to sell more RCA radios, it became profitable in its own right. NBC Red, that was the flagship network. They had the established shows, the advertisers. They had the radio plays, the mysteries, the adventure, and detective serials, soap operas, quiz shows, variety hours, talent shows. And I would be on NBC Blue because that was the news and public affairs programming arm. And there is NBC Blue, which doesn't look too blue, does it? They did headlines, remote reporting, sidewalk interviews, panel discussions, weather reports, farm reports. Anybody listened to WABC radio in the mid 1960s with Dan Ingram and Herb Oscar Anderson and also Harry Harrison? You listen to them? Okay. I knew Charlie Greer, who was the overnight guy there. And I said, why is WABC doing farm reports at 3 o'clock in the morning? He said, to keep our license. We have to serve the public interest. We were broadcasting in Nebraska and also Illinois. That's why we had reports from the Chicago Mercantile and also the Hogs Report and all these other things. So nobody could complain that we weren't serving the community. They did a half hour of farm reports at 3 o'clock in the morning. WABC, middle of Manhattan, doing farm reports. Anyway, those were the staples of the Blue Network programming. NBC was officially founded in June. NBC was the first permanent full-service radio network in the United States. There had been some national broadcasts prior to their establishment, but for only what was considered the most important events like presidential inauguration. They commercialized radio, and the BBC was upset with that. They thought people should have a subscription to radio. How dare you commercialize radio? But it set an example for broadcasting systems across the globe. NBC was the first permanent radio network broadcasting primarily on the East Coast. And the first NBC show, well, that's not Doc Severinsen and the band, but it was a band. On November 15th, close to 2.5 million homes tuned in for the launch of NBC's first broadcast. Hosted from a hotel ballroom in New York City, the 4-hour show highlighted popular musical and comedic acts, and their signal boomed as far west as Kansas City, Missouri. Oh, the great lover died, Rudolph Valentino. You know, one of these guys, superstar in the 1920s. He was an Italian-born actor. He was the great lover of silent film. 1921, he becomes a star playing Julio in The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. The war drama became known for a tango scene featuring Valentino and Beatrice Dominguez. Valentino's sudden popularity was due to being managed by skillful Hollywood press agents. He was the Latin lover. He was the great lover, or simply Valentino. And there he is in The Son of the Sheik, Rudolph Valentino. On August 23rd, Valentino died suddenly from peritonitis after he suffered a ruptured ulcer. His death caused worldwide hysteria, several suicides, riots at his lying in state, which attracted a crowd that stretched for 11 blocks. 80,000 fans attended his funeral in Manhattan. He was one of the major celebrities of the Roaring '20s, but he was created by the Hollywood studio public relations machine. He was the first. It's over there. It's over. Well, by this point, it's over 8 years. The First World War and its subsequent peace settlements gave rise to new ambitions, rivalries, and tensions. People had high expectations that the post-war peace settlement would create a new world order. I've heard that one before, New World Order, and ensure that the slaughter of the First World War was never repeated. Treaty of Versailles. This is actually what launched Hitler, the Treaty of Versailles. Clemenceau and Orlando and Woodrow Wilson there, along with David Lloyd George. David Lloyd George of Great Britain, Vittorio Orlando of Italy, George Clemenceau of France, and Woodrow Wilson, the President of the United States. The war ended on November 11th, 1918, after 4 years of fighting and the loss of millions of lives. The Treaty of Versailles was signed in June 1919, created the League of Nations, an international body intended to promote peace and prevent war. America never joined the League of Nations for various reasons, including isolationism. The treaty was an uneasy compromise. Each of the victorious allies, Britain, America, France, and Italy, and they all go their own way. Germany was forced to surrender territory, disarm, and pay for the war's damage. These divisive conditions were criticized as overly vindictive by many in Britain and America. The treaty's terms caused immediate outrage and lasting bitterness in Germany. Now, Ludendorff was the general who lost the war for Germany. And he starts spreading lies. The big myth. We didn't lose on the battlefield. It was the stab in the back. And this guy, Hitler, buys into what Ludendorff was saying. The treaty left Germany in a surprisingly strong geostrategic position, creating Poland, Czechoslovakia, and the Baltic states. The treaty put a buffer zone between Germany and one of its traditional rivals, Russia. Fighting among the new states weakened them, and the geography of their new borders made it difficult to defend. Germany emerged from the war with a small, relatively weak states on its eastern border. Treaty of Lausanne ended World War II in July of 1923, and it was signed by France, Britain, Italy, Japan, Greece, and Romania, along with the new Republic of Turkey. So why did Hitler hate Jews? Well, if you look at this, it's really stereotypical. I'm not sure if that's a woman or a man with the Jewish star there, stabbing the good-looking German in the back. That was what Ludendorff pushed. By the way, in Wonder Woman, the last Wonder Woman, what was the name of the evil guy? Ludendorff. Ludendorff. I'm sure you got that movie here, probably. Yeah. During the First World War, between 1914 and 1918, Adolf Hitler, Austrian, was a soldier in the German army. At the end of the war, he and many other German soldiers like him couldn't get over the defeat of the German Empire. And the German army command, led by Ludendorff, spread the myth that the army had not lost on the battlefield, but they had been betrayed. Well, who betrayed them? Who betrayed them? It's called the stab in the back. Hitler bought into the myth. Jews and communists had betrayed the country and brought a left-wing government to power that wanted to throw in the towel. February 24th, 1920 is the start of Nazism. Hitler delivered the Nazi Party platform speech to a large crowd in Munich. An event is often regarded as the foundation of Nazism. The German Workers' Party already existed. Hitler was a great orator, laid out a 25-point platform. Central idea, strengthen German citizenship by excluding and controlling Jewish people and others deemed to be non-German, which is actually a problem for him because he was from Austria rather. And under the Hitler plan, he would have been deported, wouldn't he? I would think so. And Germans began to support his platform. He was an Austrian citizen. And he writes Mein Kampf while he was in jail after the beer hall push, where he tried to overthrow the government. November 9th and 10th, 1923. Released from jail, December 1924. That's the Nazi Party in 1922, but he had to cool his heels. Anyway, he blamed the Jews for the defeat. He created the stereotypical enemy. In the 1920s, the defeated country was still in a major crisis. According to the Nazis, expelling the Jews was the solution to all the problems in Germany. Now, the Nazi Party itself experienced slow growth, had about 17,000 people, and Hitler, on probation, was forbidden to speak in public by the Bavarian government. He was on parole, and if he speaks, he's going back to Austria. Germany and the USSR make nice the Treaty of Berlin, also known as the German-Soviet Neutrality and Non-Aggression Pact, was signed on April 24th. The treaty stated that Germany and the Soviet Union would agree to be neutral with each other if one was attacked by any third party within the following 5 years. The Treaty of Berlin marked a short-term improvement in the relationship between Germany and the USSR. She doesn't look alone, does she? Greta Garbo? She doesn't look alone at all in this picture. I want to be alone. Greta Garbo is 19 years old. She arrived in America in 1925. Her arrival had come quietly, and from the start, she showed a reluctance to deal with the press or reveal anything about her private life. Her first American film, The Torrent, cast her as a Spanish peasant who is desperate to become an opera star. How could you become an opera star in silent movies? Doesn't make sense, does it? Anyway, her next two films, The Tempest and Flesh and The Devil, were successful, and she becomes an international star. That is the original Winnie the Pooh. How many of you read Winnie the Pooh? Winnie the Pooh, A. Milne. It's a children's book by the English author A. Milne and English illustrator E.H. Shepard, released on October 14th. The book is set in the fictional Hundred Acre Wood with a collection of short stories following the adventures of a teddy bear, Winnie the Pooh, and his friends Christopher Robin, Piglet, Eeyore, Owl, Rabbit, Kanga, and Roo. It was a smashing success. It sold, now it came out on October 14th. By the end of the year, it had sold 150,000 copies. Mary Poppins also pops up in 1926. It is November the 13th, and Mary Poppins made her first appearance in a short story written by Pamela Travers for The Sun, a local newspaper in Christchurch, New Zealand. Robert Goddard figured out how to get to the moon. His only problem is he didn't have the material to get to the moon. This is him in 1926 on March 16th. He is considered the father of modern rocket propulsion. He constructed and successfully tested the first rocket using liquid fuel in March of 1926. By the way, he had it all figured out in 1914, how to get to the moon. His only problem then, he didn't have the materials, but he figured it all out. And there's Goddard with one of his rockets. We got somebody there.
Yeah, Hitler was influenced by Henry Ford's publication, The Dearborn Independent.
Yeah, the Dearborn Independent was a newspaper afterwards. It came out, well, no, it came out in 1919, but it really got bad in 1920, 21, 22, 23. Yeah, and Henry Ford got an award for Adolf Hitler, and Hitler admired Henry Ford. Anyway, Goddard first obtained public notice in 1907 in a cloud of smoke from a powder rocket fired in the basement of the Worcester Polytechnic Institute Physics Building. 1914, he received 2 U.S. patents. One was for a rocket using solid fuel. The other was for a 2- or 3-stage rocket using solid fuel. That rocket would take Americans to the moon. That blueprint. SAT is introduced. There it is, the SAT, which I guess is now not as significant as it once was. It was the standardized test commonly used for the purpose of admission to colleges and universities in the United States, first given on June 23rd. Test owned by the College Board, originally developed by Carl Brigham, was administered to 8,000 students. Well, there is Cab Calloway, who used to, if you wanted to find him, and if he wasn't on the road, you went to Yonkers Raceway. He was always there. He was always, I mean, he was permanently there. So what's the legacy? Besides the library opening in 1926. But the people who came to this library in 1926 just lived all of that. Prohibition ended in 1933. The Harlem Renaissance speakeasy era produced many top-notch talents. Duke Ellington was hired at the Cotton Clubs as the house band in 1927. Cab Calloway and his orchestra took over as the house band in 1931. The other people who performed there, Louis Armstrong, Ethel Waters, Lena Horne, Bill Bojangles Robinson, and the Nicholas brothers. One of the Nicholas brothers taught Michael Jackson how to dance. They were phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And they look like okay women. They don't look like they're causing any trouble, do they? The 5 of them? Maybe they were auditioning for Sex in the City, walking that way. But anyway, the flapper lifestyle and look disappeared, and the Roaring 20s era of glitz and glamour came to a crashing end in America after the stock market crash in October 1929. The Coolidge prosperity ended, although Hoover was the president. Unable to afford the latest trends and lifestyles, the once vibrant flapper women returned to their dropped hemlines, and the flapper dress disappeared. In 1963, Betty Friedan released the book Feminine Mistake. Anybody read that? And if you didn't, he could get you a copy of it, right? It's upstairs somewhere. The book was the start of the 1960s women's rights movement. That is Flagstaff, Arizona, Route 66. My son is standing there. It was decommissioned June 27th, 1985. Some of the roads still exist. Interstate highways killed Route 66. There were some spots there that are trying to build themselves up. During the Dust Bowl era, the 1930s, the large-scale migration to California of the Okies dispossessed rural people from the Dust Bowl states during the 1930s, accelerated the road's development and also produced yet another by name for the highway, the Mother Road. So called in John Steinbeck's 1939 novel of the migration, The Grapes of Wrath, which I'm sure Paul has here. Bobby Troup sketched out the song in 1946 as he drove across the country to California. Thank you for coming. Where he had dreams of making it big in music, he chose to travel on Route 66, and Nat King Cole had the big hit with the song. No Nazis, that's in Rockstadt, the former East Germany. Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party rose to power in 1932. Germany annexed Austria and Czechoslovakia. 1938, Germany invaded Poland. September 1st, 1939. That started World War II. Japan bombed Pearl Harbor December 7th, 1941. The war ended in 1945. Nazi Party has been outlawed in Germany. Gertrude Ederle. Well, her hearing was permanently impaired after while she swam the English Channel. She later became a swimming instructor for deaf children. She was inducted into the International Swimming Hall of Fame in 1965 and the Women's Sports Hall of Fame in 1980. She lived over in Oradell, New Jersey. Oh, that is me and no, it's John Harrington, the CEO of the Boston Red Sox. That was back in 1994. I'm the stick man here. I'm holding everybody's microphone because I'm asking all the questions, and that's radio. 1939, the Federal Communications Commission launched an antitrust investigation of the network NBC. 4 years after, the FCC ordered RCA to get rid of NBC entirely. The company opted to sell off its entire Blue network in 1943. That would become the American Broadcast Company. GE reacquired RCA at the end of 1985, then announced their intention to sell off all of RCA's non-broadcast assets and NBC's radio holdings. I was there when it died. After a failed attempt to sell the entire radio unit to Westinghouse, Westwood One bought the NBC radio network, ended in 1999. SATs on March 1st, 2023. Columbia became the first Ivy League university to permanently suspend its long-standing requirement that applicants submit their scores on the SAT. It was the latest in a series of setbacks for the college testing industry. California's public universities dropped the test in 2021 and 2022. Winnie the Pooh. Robert Goddard's work laid for the foundation for spaceflight. We got one there?
Yeah, what were the popular books in theater of that time?
I'm not sure what the popular books were, but you might know. Winnie the Pooh is one of them. There were all, well, Gatsby wasn't. Gatsby wasn't one of them. Who were these? Sinclair Lewis had, that was the whole lost generation that Gertrude Stein talked about. Sinclair Lewis was one of them, and of course Gatsby, Scott Fitzgerald, Scott Fitzgerald. Movies, Wings, they're all silent movies. Anything with Valentino. Winnie the Pooh and Mary Poppins endured in the culture and remained popular. Rudolph Valentino lived on in the culture during the 20th century. Greta Garbo's fame lasted because she disappeared from the public spotlight. And I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. And any questions, any comments? It is your turn to talk.